There we go. Now, share. All right, here we go. All right, everyone. Welcome to the December 2024 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting. Today, here's our agenda. So we'll do announcements as we always do to start us off. Then I'll give a talk on Crimes for Christmas, my new book. And along the way, we'll do a little bit of trivia for fun. And I'll give away 2 prizes. And then we'll have our discussion at the end. I'll also read a little bit to you. For the trivia, when it comes up, there'll be 2 times that you'll get a little trivia question. And just put your answers in the chat. Whoever puts the answer in first, I guess I'll just do wins. And if you win, you'll have a choice. I can either send you a copy of Crimes for Christmas, or I can send you a copy of the latest volume of Steel True Blade Straight, which should be out in a few weeks. So either one works. You just would have to let me know which one you'd like when I let you know if you win. So there we go. All right. So let's start with announcements. So obviously the big one for us in America is we got BSI weekend coming up. So huge event as always. Now it's the longest weekend in the world because it goes from Wednesday through Sunday. Some cool events as always, there always are, but I'll just call out a couple of them. Hal Glatzer wanted me to remind everyone, if you're there on Wednesday, he's got his free Sherlockian audio play, A Musicale in Mrs. Hudson's Parlor. Unfortunately, my flight, I don't think I'm going to make it because I land at 3:30. So I was hoping to make it, but I don't think I will this year. But he always does a fun job, and he's actually spoken at 5 Miles before, and I highly recommend him. If you are there on Thursday at the Doylean Honor Ceremony, I'm giving out the Fiction and Poetry Awards for the Doylean Awards. And if you're there, please stop by, say hello to me. I would love to see ya and just say hello, okay? It'd be great, okay? The lecture this year is Graham Moore, who wrote the book The Sherlockian. So that would be I think that'll be a lot of fun. And let's see. Ash dinner is always fun. I mean, all this stuff's always fun. And then, continuing, Mysterious Bookshop Open House is that Friday. The luncheon is for Gillette. The Gillette luncheon's that Friday as well. And of course, BSI dinner, Merchant's Room. If you're there, please stop by and say hello at the Belanger Books booth. And then for the first time ever, I'm going to be going to the Ash Brunch. I got a late flight, so I'll get to see some of you guys there as well. So looking forward to that. And if you are there Thursday night and do not have plans, the Luther Norris PSI dinner, the Prod Street Irregulars will be gathering again. It'll be a lot of fun. And we're meeting at the Grand Central Oyster Bar right after Graham Moore's talk for the BSI lecture. So we'll get there around 8:30-ish. And have dinner, do some toasts for the Prod Street Regulars as well as Luther Norris, probably some Sherlock Holmes toasts too, and just have an all-around great time. All right, I don't have any other announcements. Let me stop sharing for a second because I know some of you guys probably want to chime in and let me know what you got. And I'm just going to gallery view so I can see everybody. Okay. Tom, you had your hand up. Just need to unmute yourself, my friend.
Okay. I have another new book out. It is called To Keep Our Honor Clean. It is a book about the founding of the 3M Detective Agency, which is the agency in the Natalie McMaster's book. But this book is set in 1988 when the agency was founded, and there's rather a long prologue during the Vietnam War because her uncle Amos Murdoch, who founded it, was a Marine who served in Vietnam. So I'm really excited about it. It's different than anything else I've ever done. It's not quite as raw as the Natalie books are. I'd rate it probably a strong PG rather than a hard R, which is what the Natalie books are. So if you're interested, it went on pre-order today. To Keep Our Honor Clean from the Marines hymn. Just search it or look at my Facebook. There's a QR. And I'm looking for ARC readers too. So if you want to do that and you want to post a pre-pub review, I'd love it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Okay, Shayna and then Ray.
This in your overview of the BSI weekend, but just a reminder, I am the person in charge of the William Gillette Memorial Luncheon. And if you would like to come, we still have seats available. We're currently at about 100 people who've made reservations, but there's still room for more. So I am going to put the link to the web page for the event in the chat. That has the details of when it's happening, where it's happening, which is Friday noon, the 17th at Connolly's on West 121 West 45th Street. There are two places called Connolly's, so make sure you go to the correct one. Also, if you go to the page that Derrick was showing, there's got the link there as well. And yeah, I encourage people to make reservations, send the money via PayPal or Venmo. I do also accept personal checks by snail mail, but there's always some question as to how fast they'll get here and how often I get to check the PO box. And yeah, still room for about 30 people, so better sooner than later.
All right, thank you, Shayna. And I've heard, glowing reviews of the luncheon. Isn't there sometimes some theater there as well?
Yes, this year we are once again going to get entertainment from the Friends of Bogies. I believe this is their 40th year providing a little theatrical divertisement towards the end of the event.
Perfect. Awesome. Cool. Thank you very much. So plenty of space for those going, but get your payment in soon and get reserved. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, Ray.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to let you guys know that the Norwegian Explorers had their annual dinner this last Thursday. Our guest speaker, this is an opportunity to tell you about it. We had Larry Millette as our featured speaker, and this is the program that includes the cover of his latest book, which is Mysterious Tales of Old St. Paul. So he talked really not about the new book. He talked about how he came about writing his Holmes in Minnesota mysteries that started with the Sherlock Holmes and the Red Demon. And it was a fun talk. It was a great evening. We also distributed the latest issue of the Norwegian Explorers Christmas Annual, which the theme this year was the collection mania, which seemed to elicit a lot of contributions from people because I think we all share that manic collection desire as Sherlockians. Turned out to be our biggest issue yet. I'll put a link in the chat for with Phil Burgum's email because copies can be purchased for $8 by emailing Phil. So I'll put that in the chat when I'm done babbling. It was a good issue with a great cover by Amanda Downs. And whenever she submits artwork for us, they're always a winner. And I also distributed a pamphlet to promote the next book that I've edited that will be coming from Belanger Books sometime early in 2025. It's called Sherlock Holmes 5-Minute Mysteries, written by Kel Richards. And they're about 50 quick you solve it brain teasers that include little morals in the end that you can use as sort of biblical based devotionals. It's an odd mix that's never been done before, but I think it works really well. And I'm looking forward to it. So I thought I'd leave that little promotional pamphlet for people. Copies of the pamphlet are also going out to New York, which will be part of the goodie bags that people get at the dinners and the Gaslight Gala. So it was a good great fun evening of camaraderie by the Norwegian explorers. And if you guys are ever in Minnesota in the first week of December, please join us next year or in the years to come.
Thank you, Ray. The pictures from the dinner that I saw online looked like it was a lot of fun. So it looks like everyone had a great time there. And I believe the issue that you do yearly, I think that's also part of the BSI grab bag as well. Am I correct?
That is correct. So anybody who's going to New York and will be attending the BSI dinner or the Gaslight Gala will be getting a copy of the Christmas Annual. So anyone who's not able to go can still get a copy as soon as I put it in the chat how to do so.
I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful publication. It's beautifully done. The layout alone is just incredible. So, not to mention how wonderful the content is. So, thank you, Ray. Any other announcements for the good of the cause here? All right, I'll start talking again then. All right, I will share my screen again and I will continue on. All right. So next, oops, we have a trivia. Here's our first one. Name the ghost who visited Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. Put your answers in the chat. That's an easy one. Ooh, Shayna got it. Yes. It's Marley, Christmas Past, Christmas Present, and Christmas Yet to Come. All right. So, Shayna, you're already getting a copy of Steel True because you're in it. So you'll just have to let me know if you want Cries for Christmas or a different book. So,
The Cries for Christmas sounds really interesting.
perfect. I will bring you a copy to BSI Weekend. How's that sound? All right. Awesome. Cool. All right. So, let me just, okay. So yes, as Shayna said, it's Jacob Marley, Ghost of Christmas Past, Christmas Present, and not Christmas Future, Christmas Yet to Come. I know it's not a Sherlock Holmes story, but man, it's one of the most important Victorian stories, I think. So I love absolutely perfect story. And definitely ties in, as you saw, there have been a number of different Holmes Christmas Carol blends throughout history. So there we go. Okay, let's get to my talk now. Oh, there's a blank slide. Okay, this is me. All right. So I'm going to talk to you guys a bit about my new book, Sherlock Holmes Crimes for Christmas. So the reason I'm doing this one is I thought since it was the holiday season, it'd be a nice way to wrap up the year with a focus on a holiday book. So the book actually starts here. Okay. Actually goes back to October 2023. And Andrew Gooley, from the Strand magazine, he had recently published my story, Dr. Watson Takes the Case, in this particular issue of the Strand magazine. I believe it was issue 70, but most people call it the Capote issue because it had a undiscovered or unpublished Truman Capote story in it. If you haven't read it, it's a really good story. It's too bad Capote never was able to publish it when he was alive. So, out of the blue, it felt like it was out of the blue, Andy gave me a call saying, hey, I want to talk to you about something. I've got an idea. I'd like to put together a Sherlock Holmes advent calendar. And he said, what if we took snippets of your story, Dr. Watson Takes the Case, or some of my other stories, and use that as the basis for the Advent calendar. So we talked, I thought it was an interesting idea. Um, we agreed we couldn't possibly get something together quickly in 2023, but we could probably put something out in 2024. So that was our idea, okay, to get something out for this year. So then I thanked him. I said, let me think about this, though, because I had to really kind of mull this one over. So the first thing I really had to think about is the format. And for the rest of 2023 and into 2024, I actually had a lot of stuff going on, and I didn't really focus a lot on the Advent calendar. There are other projects that had my attention. I had the latest Steel True Blade Straight. We had put out Reading Holmes. Like those were kind of priorities at that point in times. But I kept this idea in the back of my mind. And every once in a while, I'd go to a Sherlockian Christmas book to see if I liked the idea for the format. I went to What Child Is This by Bonnie Bird because I think that's one of the best ones. And I love her format of writing her books because she really kind of blends short stories together to make a novel. And with What Child Is This, she used two stories and kind of blended them together to make this, which is a shorter novel. And if you haven't read it, it's amazing. And the illustrations by Frank Cho are out of this world. And I highly recommend it. But I thought this isn't going to work format-wise for an Advent calendar. At least I couldn't figure out in my mind how to make that work. So then I went to the idea of a short story collection. And I thought of getting several authors together to each contribute a story for each day of the Advent. So to make it like a 25-story book. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought that's probably going to be a bit unwieldy because it would probably end up being with most Sherlockians, they write the minimum they're going to write is 5,000 words. A lot of them now are getting longer stories, at least what I'm getting for submissions. And I thought, it could end up being a 700 to 800 page book. And that would just be too big for an Advent calendar. And I also thought in today's busy world, a lot of people don't have time to read an 8,000 word story in a day, especially in this season when everything's a little more hectic. So I just couldn't see that happening. I couldn't read that myself. So it took me a while, but in the spring, I finally landed on the format I wanted. And for that, I didn't turn to Sherlock Holmes mysteries. There was actually one, I kind of stumbled upon it when I was cleaning up and found one of these books. And when I saw this book, I was like, this is the format I want. Encyclopedia Brown. And if you haven't read Encyclopedia Brown, you have to, okay? Encyclopedia Brown, okay? There's a reason that Donald Sobel wrote them, won an Edgar Award, a special one just for this series, okay? That boy detective, created by Donald Sobel, he hears cases, sometimes brought by his father, Chief Brown, the chief of police, and often Encyclopedia Brown asks a question that leads to the solution of the mystery. He was pretty much a Baker Street irregular acting as a consulting detective. And he actually is called, quote, America's Sherlock Holmes in sneakers. That's his little tagline. Oh, and these are awesome stories. So, but I'm leaving out the coolest thing about these stories. The coolest thing about the it's not Father Brown, sorry, Encyclopedia Brown mysteries is that you, as the reader, solve the mystery. So you'd read an Encyclopedia Brown story, and it would end with a question, something like, who was guilty of stealing the pink rhinoceros statue? And then you turn to the back of the book and say, turn to page 86 to find out the answer. And you'd read the solution. And what I really liked about that, what was really cool, is you get to solve the mystery, right? And I thought, well, that's kind of a cool format. What if I did that for this Advent calendar book? So then I started working on the book, and I made a slight tweak to this format. Originally, I was going to set it up exactly like that, where you'd be like, okay, you finished the mystery, now turn to page 86 and find out the solution. But I thought it might be cooler to set it up so that on like the first day, you read the mystery, and then the second day, you read the solution. And that gives you kind of the night to think it over. And then you can kind of mull it over and kind of think, what's the solution going to be? And then the next day, you get to read the ending and see if you predicted it correctly. So that's the format I adopted for the book. And that's what I started writing. And here it is. Okay. Sherlock Holmes Crimes for Christmas, an advent calendar of 12 all new Sherlock Holmes adventures. So that was it, but not really, because I still had a couple of things I had to tweak with that format with the book. So the first thing I decided is I did not want this to be a children's book, which started to be a concern of mine, that if I'm basing it on Encyclopedia Brown, people are going to just assume it's a children's book. So I thought, oh, they'll see that format, just assume that, and that's not what I wanted. Not to say that I didn't want older kids reading it, because it's like a PG-13 rating for some of the stories. Maybe, as Tom said earlier about his book, a hard PG, okay? And so I purposely made a couple of things in there just so if someone looking at the book would say, okay, this is probably not for an 8-year-old, like The Christmas Ripper. Okay, so this one is about a German family that may have been murdered in their Spitalfields home, and could Jack the Ripper be responsible? It's a pretty bloody story in that the room that Holmes investigates is covered in blood. Okay, that's what he goes in and sees. It's what the artist who did my front cover based the cover on, with kind of like Holmes holding that bloody present. And so that was one thing. There's a story where the setting is a brothel, even though it's still a PG story. I mean, it's all appropriate, but again, it's the setting. Okay, so it's that's where it takes place. There's some with there's one with an axe murderer. That's actually today's story in the book. But I promise, all the stories are tasteful. It's still like, Doyle would not be embarrassed. I put some of these things in there. Okay. I promise. So that was one of the things. I just thought that way people will know it's not just for like little kids. All right. A couple other things. I also wanted it to be just tangentially a Christmas book. It's actually more of like a winter book. And there are some stories that mention Christmas. A lot of them do. They mention the Christmas season. But I also have plenty of stories in there that also mention other holidays, like Watson just noticing, that the Buddhists are celebrating Bodhi Day. I believe there's I have the menorah in there in a window. Like I do little things like that to make it so it's not super Christmas focused, although there is definitely some of that in there. But really, I just wanted people to enjoy the stories. And even though it's written for this time of year, you could read it, in June and still enjoy the book. It's not like you have to read it now. And then lastly, I asked Brian to add a couple little illustrations throughout the book. And so at the top of each page or each story, it tells you the date that you're supposed to read it. Again, you don't have to follow that, but like today's would be December 7th. And then there's like little incidental artwork throughout, which I just thought added to the festiveness of the book. And so there's just little illustrations here and there throughout the book. Again, to make it kind of feel like a wintry or a Christmas book. And I thought that would also look like a nice present if you wanted to give it to someone. So that was the thought with that. So that's the story of the book. And in a minute, I'll read some of the book to you. I'll read today's story just to kind of give you a highlight of what it might be like. But first, the second trivia question of today. And again, if you joined us late to answer the trivia question, if you're the first one to put the answer in the chat, you will get it. Here is the question. Okay, the character in the Blue Carbuncle shares the same name as the street where Nathan Garrideb resides in The Three Garridebs. Name the character from the Blue Carbuncle with the same name as the street. I bet Larry's jumping on there.
We just did that one, so I know it. I'm not doing it right. I typed it in, but I don't know how to extend it. Hold
In the
on.
chat, hit enter.
Oh, I did? Okay.
Just hit enter.
All right, my
No, Larry,
right.
hit enter. It's not there yet. If you know it.
Well, I know it. Damn it.
Just say it then.
Ryder.
Ryder, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
We just did the Three Garridebs last
Yes, I
month.
know. I thought,
That's
if Larry
fine.
gets on here, he's going to steal this one.
I already have the book, though.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what you missed at the beginning is I said you could get, I'll get you a copy of the latest issue of True Blue. Sorry, True Blue. It's Madonna. A Steel True Blade Straight. Okay.
Oh, that'd be great. But
And you're gonna want, and Larry, you're gonna want this one because it actually has a piece that Ron wrote that had Jim found, and it's really cool. So,
well, I just want to say though that I've been doing your thing since you gave me the book on the first. Or you delivered it to me. On the first, you didn't give it to me. I bought it, but and so far I have failed to solve the first three of the mysteries. I just wanted to say, and I've got excuses for that, but we won't discuss them here.
Okay.
But I found them very challenging, and it is fun to take a day and think about it.
It's a setup.
It's kind of fun to take a day and just, even not rush right into the solution like I would normally do, but to make myself take 24 hours, but it hasn't helped, but still, it's fun.
All right. Let me just, okay. So the answer, as Larry gave you, is James Ryder. Okay. From the Blue Carbuncle. Don't forget to celebrate Blue Carbuncle Day after Christmas. Oh, one of my favorite stories right there. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. And I thought what I would do is, for those of you who don't have the book, and even if you do, I was going to read today's story, okay, for you. And then after that, it'll probably take me, I don't know. Like I said, these are pretty quick reads, so maybe 8 to 10 minutes. And then I'm not going to tell you the ending. You'll have to wait till tomorrow. And if you don't have the book and you want to know the ending, just email me and I can let you know. Okay, I can send you the ending. But today's story is The Adventure of the Gentle Axe Murderer, okay, for December 7th. And again, it ends with a question, like for just kind of like that Encyclopedia Brown format. So I'll read to you, and then afterwards, I'll open this up for discussion for today. And that will probably wrap up our meeting, okay? So, The Adventure of the Gentle Axe Murderer. My brother wouldn't hurt a fly, Mr. Holmes. The idea that he attempted to murder his wife is beyond the realm of possibility, bemoaned Mr. Raymond Perry, the brother of Atticus Perry, the man who reportedly tried to kill his missus by chopping her up with an axe. Holmes and I were standing in the hospital room of Atticus Perry, where the exceptionally tall killer lay dying, a bullet lodged in his head. Raymond, also tall but not the height of his enormous brother, stood in wait, knowing that Atticus, an accused attempted murderer, probably wouldn't last through the night. The events which had occurred just a scant 2 hours before had already made a sensation. The evening editions of the newspapers were preparing to have large, flashy headlines about the mild-mannered man who suddenly attacked his wife in a demented rage. As Holmes inspected the injured Atticus Perry, I looked over my notes from our discussion with Inspector Lestrade. Mrs. Atticus Perry had explained the situation to the police. She had been noticing that her husband had been acting strangely for the last 2 weeks. After he'd taken a fall off a ladder while repairing some loose shingles on the roof. She claimed he hit his head when he fell, but it wasn't serious enough for him to see a doctor. After that, he'd been getting aggressive with her and criticizing every small detail of her life. This morning, he told her that he'd had a dream the night before about killing her. She told him that was horrifying. She asked him to see a doctor. That's when he became angry with her. He yelled at her using a string of foul language, then stormed out of the house. Mrs. Perry went to her bedroom where she kept important documents hidden under a floorboard. She wanted to check on the name of her husband's doctor and send a note to him, asking him to come see her husband at once. She was afraid that her husband might have a serious medical issue, and she was becoming fearful that he might harm her. Both her fears came to fruition. While she was in the bedroom, she found the name of her husband's doctor, Dr. Mason. When she stood up, she saw her husband in the doorway. His eyes blazed with murderous rage. In his hands, he gripped a large axe. "Atticus, what's wrong?" she'd asked her husband. That was when he attacked her. From what the police have discerned, Atticus Perry had gone outside, yelling and screaming that he'd had it with his wife, and something had to be done about her. He traversed through the light snow that had fallen the previous evening, grabbed an axe he had from a storage shed, and then trudged back to the house. All the time he was loudly muttering that he was going to kill his wife. He called her names unfit for the newspapers. That was reported by Mr. Simmons, the Perry's neighbor. Simmons was outside walking the grounds, picking up fallen branches, when he heard the ranting from Atticus. Simmons, worried that something was wrong with his neighbor, went into his house, grabbed his shotgun, and ran over to the Perry house. He heard Mrs. Perry calling for help, so he ran into the house towards the sound of the shouting. Mr. Simmons ran to the back of the house to the bedroom, where he saw that Atticus Perry had backed his wife into a corner. Perry had the axe lifted above his head. "I'm finally going to give you what you deserve," he shouted in a rage. The husband was clearly going to strike his wife dead. "I asked him to drop his axe," Simmons reported. "He snarled that he was going to put it down all right, down through his wife's skull. That's when I shot him. I had to, or else Mrs. Perry would be dead." I read the last part a few times, thinking of the medical mystery of the mind. There'd been the case of Phineas Gage, the American railroad worker who'd gotten an iron tamping rod that had entered and exited his head. Surprisingly, the man survived, but his personality greatly changed because of it. Could the same transformation have occurred in Mr. Atticus Perry? Could the fall from the ladder have caused his personality to shift from mild-mannered man to a vulgar axe murderer? I asked Raymond Perry if he'd spoken to his brother after he fell off the ladder. "Did you notice any change in his personality?" I inquired. "I spoke to my brother yesterday. There wasn't anything wrong with him," Raymond explained to both Holmes and me. "He didn't say anything about taking a spill off a ladder, and he had nothing but kind words to say about his wife. He told me he'd heard that it was going to snow, and he was looking forward to it. My brother loves winter and has always enjoyed Christmas. He carves toy animals and brings them to the children in the neighborhood. Some of the kids call him Father Christmas, even though he looks nothing like Kris Kringle. That's the kind of man my brother is, Dr. Watson. I swear to you both that my brother is innocent, and now he's going to die because that neighbor, Simmons, shot him." "That neighbor," Holmes explained, "said he heard your brother shouting vicious things about Mrs. Perry. It is why he came to investigate and brought his shotgun in case of trouble. If it wasn't for that neighbor, Mr. Simmons, Mrs. Perry might be the one in the hospital bed, or worse, she could be in the morgue." Raymond looked exasperated. "I'm sure it was all a misunderstanding. We'll never know, though. Poor Atticus won't last much longer." I told Raymond my thoughts on the mind and how accidents can impact it. Dr. Watson is correct, Holmes concurred. There have been a number of villains I've encountered over the years who had a similar accident which changed them. Unfortunately, the same could have occurred in this instance. Holmes looked at the lanky form of the injured Atticus Perry, his feet sticking out from the hospital bed. He looked sympathetically at the brother. Dr. Watson and I will go to the crime scene and give it a look over. That is all I can promise you at this point in time. Raymond Perry thanked the detective, and after a short, handsome ride, Holmes and I were at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Atticus Perry. It was a small, single-story cottage with about half an acre of land. Inspector Lestrade greeted us at the front door. Tell me, Holmes said to Lestrade, will Mrs. Perry receive any money from the death of her husband? Not so far as we've discovered, said Lestrade. The house has a mortgage on it, and Mr. Perry worked odd jobs as a painter, carpenter, and laborer. From what we've established, he made just enough money to cover his family's expenses. Was there a life insurance policy on either him or his wife? No, the inspector answered. According to both Mrs. Perry and Raymond Perry, neither Atticus nor his wife had an insurance policy. No stocks or bonds either. They had very little in the way of savings, just a few pound notes hidden away in the back of a kitchen cabinet. Holmes thanked the inspector, and the ferret-faced fellow led us both to the bedroom, the scene of the crime. I learned over the years working with Holmes that a crime scene can tell a story as clearly as the narratives I pen. When we entered, I could see what had occurred almost as if I was there. Off to the side of the entryway was the sharp axe resting on the floor of the bedroom. It was speckled with droplets of blood, as was the bed coverings from the bullet which had exited at Atticus Perry and lodged itself in the bedroom wall just above the headboard. In the corner, by the left side of the bed, was a scattered pile of papers. That was the location of Mrs. Perry. She hid in the corner while her husband threatened her. Holmes looked over the entirety of the room from top to bottom. He paid close attention to the axe head and handle, as well as the floor and ceiling of the room. Then he turned his attention to the papers in the corner. Those are the documents that Mrs. Perry was looking through when her husband attacked, Lestrade explained. They seem to be precisely what Mrs. Perry reported. Doctor's notes, the mortgage on the house, things like that. Holmes went over to the papers and took two from the floor. He unfolded one of them, read it, and then placed it back on the ground. The detective turned to us and frowned deeply. Lestrade, where is Mrs. Perry? She's over at the neighbor's house. One of my constables is there with her now. Excellent. Let us go see her. We walked over so that Holmes could see Mrs. Perry. Mr. Simmons was repairing the front step to his house. He was a whiskered young man with a kind smile. He greeted us warmly and said, Horrible business, this. If I hadn't sprung upon Atticus, I'm afraid his missus would be dead. Simmons took us into his house, where we found Mrs. Perry sitting in the parlor with the constables beside her reading a book. The missus was sipping a cup of tea and looking rather drained. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes puffy and red, and her skin sallow. I could see that she'd been through a difficult ordeal that day. Mrs. Perry, explained Mr. Simmons, this is Sherlock Holmes. He's here to see you about what happened today. Actually, Holmes corrected, I'm here to see both of you. Inspector Lestrade, do the honors of arresting Mr. Simmons and Mrs. Perry for the murder of her husband. And then the question you'd have to find out tomorrow is, how did Holmes know that Atticus Perry was murdered? And then you get the solution tomorrow. That's the format of the book. Okay. But have fun. If you think you know it, don't peek, but you can email me and I'll let you know. All right. So that kind of concludes my talk, a little bit of my reading. I thought I would open it up for discussion. If anyone has questions for me about the book. Well, I can't give the answer away, Jenny. You have to wait for tomorrow. That's how it works. All right, Ray, you've got a question.
Yeah. Well, it's not so much a question; it's more a uh, observation, I guess. The December 3rd story, "The Mystery of the Businessman's Body."
Uh-huh.
I really liked the names you gave to your characters in that one. And so particularly jumped out at me. Well, as my wife and I read that one, and you got to the second suspect, who was Mr. Armin Armstrong, a prize-winning boxer. It's like, what a great name for a boxer, Armin Armstrong. Um, and then you used that, not to give anything away, but I think the in the end, Holmes named the suspect, and it was you named the wrong one. I'm pretty confident that the name was attached to the different profession. So you had two suspects, each with their own unique profession, and we knew in the solution that it had to be the person of this particular profession, and then you named the wrong person.
To check that because like I said, this was read by the Strand and stuff. They were the ones who kind of had to check me on it. So I'll
Yeah.
check.
So yeah, that it just jumped out at me when my wife and I read the solution. It's like, well, and then we had to flip back, and it's like that. Yep, looks like that slipped through the cracks. So if anyone else reads that when they get to December 3, just be aware that the actual perpetrator is the name is switched somehow, unfortunately, but it's
I'll take
still
a
a
look.
good story.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have to look too. Yeah. I didn't notice anything, but
Okay, Larry thought it was correct. Okay, what was your
I mean,
question,
I didn't know,
Larry?
I didn't notice it was wrong, but I'll look again.
Okay. Did you have a question, Larry?
Well, I was going to just say, I wonder if there's like part of the clue of the one you just read was the fact that there's a Perry and a Mason in the story, if that's a clue. But that's the only thing.
I was wondering if we would catch
Maybe
on
there's
that.
a legal problem in there somewhere.
I was having fun with some of the names of the different characters and stuff with it. But you'll find out.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, yeah. I didn't really think it had anything to do with anything.
Uh, other questions or any questions about this in general or comments?
Well, how did you come up with all these little puzzles? I think
So
coming up with these puzzles is the hardest part for me writing a Sherlock Holmes pastiche. And here you came up with a whole bunch of them. How'd you do it?
well, and that's a good question. And really, what was interesting about this particular format is it wasn't like a typical Sherlock Holmes pastiche.
Right.
And so, like as what I just read to you, I mean, if it was a regular story, it'd be fleshed out a lot more because I had to really make it so that I designed them so that you could read the first half or the second half. I didn't want it to take more than 10 or 15 minutes out of a person's day because of the format of this and because of like I said, there's just the people being busy and stuff like that. So really most of these stories are only combined 3,000 words, which is much shorter than a typical pastiche, which would be at least double that. And so it was really just about the little trick. And honestly, I read a lot of Encyclopedia Brown. I read a lot of like little 2-minute mysteries just to get, and not that I took anything from them, but just to get my mindset in that idea. And that was kind of how I did it. And just little things would just pop in my head by doing that. And it just kind of got to that extent. I was just like, okay, here we go. And I would just like, okay, I'll use this one. I'll use that one. And, there was a number that and I had about, I don't know, about a half dozen ideas I did not use. And so I'm probably going to do a second book in the series this year or next year too. And so yeah, because it seems like this actually, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the book, quite a bit actually. So I'll probably end up doing another one, at least one more, maybe even more. I know Andrew for the Strand said, he would we could keep it going. So you can actually order a copy of it through the Strand if you'd like to. All right. Other thoughts or questions for me on the book or anything like that?
I don't know if I have any more.
Okay. I guess one other thing I would say for ideas is some of these are taken from real life mysteries. And so the one that I believe the one that I read to you today, that the solution is taken from a real life, if I recall, this one was a real life one that had happened, and how the answer ends up being part of what happens in real life. So there is that. Okay, I did read. Yeah, that was another thing I did read. It was several true crime kind of things too, just to get my mind going on this. But yeah, so this was kind of fun to do. And those of you reading it, I hope you're enjoying the format of it. 'Cause I don't think there's really too many books quite like this, at least not Sherlockian books, and especially designed to be read in a month, broken up over time. Tom, do you have a question? Oh, you're muted, Tom.
I got it. Okay. More of a comment that just struck a chord. A lot of times when I want ideas for home stories, on newspapers.com, you can find a wealth of London Victorian newspapers, and those folks were fascinated with crimes. A lot of they're not mysteries in the paper. They're, this is what happened, this is who did it. But those can be easily adapted, and since they're period stories, I really like to use them because they spark ideas, and they don't always, almost never in my stories do they turn out like they actually happen. But it's a great starting place.
Right. And I have done that as well in the past, gone back to some of the older historic documents to look at those. I did not do that for this particular book though.
I've never read Encyclopedia Brown, so now you've given me something to do.
Oh yes, go to the library. Get all 29 books.
Well,
They
as a
are
fellow teacher, I remember it very well.
they're delightful, and yes, and they're
They're
great.
great young
If
kid
you,
books.
yeah, if you have
Like third graders, fourth graders, I would say.
younger people, enjoy them immensely. They're a lot of fun. Um, Another thing, yeah, there's stories with holes is another thing. It's kind of similar where like you come up with kind of a riddle and you have to figure out the answer. I'd read some of those as well just to kind of get my brain going for this book as well. But a lot of fun. It was definitely a lot of fun to write it, and yeah, it was cool. I mean, like I said, very different. I didn't expect it to turn out the way it ended up being. I thought it would probably end up being more like a short story collection. I had actually reached out to a couple of authors to see if they'd be interested in contributing, and then it just went into a different direction when I actually started writing it. So,
Okay.
so it was a lot of fun. All right. Well, I would say that concludes our, if there's no more other questions, I'll say that concludes today's meeting. Okay.
What was that website again?
For
What the Thomas used to get ideas?
It's newspapers.com.
Okay.
You have to pay for a subscription, but
Okay.
since I also have ancestry.com that I do genealogy research, you can bundle it in.
Okay.
So that's how I get it. It's sort of like I'm getting more bang for my buck because I use the papers for ancestry, but I also use them for Sherlock.
and
Okay.
and a number of libraries, if you're part of your local library, have subscriptions to it as well. So it's an easy thing to access through them as well.
I love the Police Gazette because that's got all the juicy stuff.
All right. Well, we're at the point where we're wrapping up the year here, and so I'll be putting a call out for speakers for next year. If anyone's interested in giving a talk for 5 miles from anywhere, or if you have an idea or for a topic and just want to do that, or if you want us to read one of the original Holmes stories and have a discussion on it, that all works. And just let me know. Okay, so I'll let you know soon what the January topic will be once I hear from some people and kind of get next year set up. Other than that, have a wonderful holiday, everyone, or holiday season. And I look forward to seeing a lot of you guys in New York. And before then, back in here in January. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
Thanks
holidays.
a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.
Adios.